Raider Nation, good morning. It's Mitchell Rettens here, host of the Raiders Report, with some very interesting Raiders head coaching rumors. Now, I'm going to go through, we're going to discuss all the candidates that the Silver and Black requested to interview yesterday, but I'm somebody where I look at certain things and I sit back and I go, I wonder if the Raiders have another plan that they're thinking about in the back of their mind, and all of these coaching candidates, all of these coaching interviews are leading up to something. I'm going to tell you what I think that is going to be coming up here on the show. Also, we're going to get into some important NFL news. There's a lot of stuff that happened this morning. We'll talk a little bit about the playoff games last night. Man, oh man, does it feel good that the Chargers are no longer in the playoff mix. Now we just got to really get rid of the 49ers, and we got to be able to get rid of the Denver Broncos. Now, I know it's early. I am not at work. I will be at work later on today. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure those notifications are turned on. And wow, Dylan Raiola just committed to Oregon. That's very, very interesting. We'll see if Dante Moore ends up returning, but I will be live later on tonight for the Texans and Steelers game. We're going to be cheering on my guy Chugs. Hopefully Houston ends up getting the dub, but no matter what, I'm always going to do my best here to keep you guys up to date with all things going on around the Raiders. This is a really important time in the offseason. I got all gas, no brakes, and if you feel the exact same way, make sure you're subscribed. So first off here, we're going to go through the 5 coaches that the Raiders requested to interview yesterday. I made a short on all of these videos, and I was trying to do it to the best of my ability, but with trying to get our 2 watch parties going, we were a little bit all over the place yesterday, so I apologize for maybe not getting it out ASAP Rocky like I usually do. So the first name that I want to talk about here is Panthers defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero. And very interesting name. I'm not going to lie to all of y'all. Played for the Oakland Raiders in 2004. Panthers defensive coordinator. I actually think that he's done a lot of good with maybe not as much talent around him as that some other teams have had. He's been the Panthers DC since 2023, was the Broncos defensive coordinator in 2022 when that whole team did not go the way that it was supposed to. But I also think you could argue the whole head coach situation was not very good there in Denver. Here's where I think it gets interesting, though, was with the Rams from 2017 to 2021. That's a Sean McVay guy. If you come from the Sean McVay tree, I'm going to be interested in you. And what I think is interesting is you're going to hear a lot of these other people that the Raiders requested to interview. There is tons and tons of overlap with all 5 of the people that the Raiders requested to interview yesterday. So he was the safeties coach, he was a DB coach, and he was a pass game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator for the Rams from 2017 to 2021. That's multiple seasons underneath Sean McVay when they had a lot of really good football teams there. Here's also what I think is good. Only 45 years old. Only 45 years old. We've been looking at some younger candidates. I think that's really smart. The other thing that we just got to be able to talk about, and I hope that you guys don't get mad, and I hate that I always have to preface it, but it's 2026. The other thing that we got to talk about here is Evero does qualify for the Rooney Rule. And if you're the Raiders, you got to interview at least 2 candidates of minority. Vance Joseph is already interviewed for the Raiders, and now Evero would be the second. The reason why this is important, and I'll get to where my big important, I think maybe discovery or trying to read between the lines here of what Spytech and Tom Brady are doing. This is now the 2 minority candidates. I'm not saying that that's the only reason why they brought him in. He's got a hell of a resume, some really good overlap. Again, Raider in 2004. But if that's your 2 Rooney Rule candidates, that means if you interview those guys, that means whoever you bring in the door, you can then hire. The Raiders technically cannot hire a head coach right now because they have not satisfied the Rooney Rule. So what have I been saying? If there's a certain guy that you really, really want, you lock him in, you make sure your 2 candidates that you want to interview for the Rooney Rule are 2 good candidates. Vance Joseph's got AFC West experience. Get an inside look at one of the best defenses in the NFL from the Denver Broncos. And then also you can look at an up-and-coming young defensive coordinator in Evero who's got Sean McVay ties. I think it makes a lot of sense, but the Raiders, I think, are trying to dot an I, cross a T before going in there and circling the answer for their next head coach. Let's go to another name here. It's going to be Rams defensive coordinator Chris Shula. Shula's the name I'm really excited about. If you watch my Raiders head coach candidate video that I put out probably a good 6 weeks ago. At this point, Shula was ranked very, very high on that list. I'll admit the Rams defense hasn't played as well as what I've been hoping over the past month or so, but Rams defensive coordinator for the past 2 seasons has worked with Sean McVay since 2017. A lot of people around the NFL consider Shula maybe the next McVay type of coach. If you can get the next McVay, man, I mean, you're going to set yourself up in a really good situation. Grandson of coaching legend Don Shula. Shula had the 72 Dolphins undefeated. I mean, a lot of good coaching ties. And, you know, one of the things that's important to Mark Davis, and it should be important to everybody out there, there's certain, like, family trees, right? The Shanahan tree, very well respected. Kubiak tree, very well respected. The Harbaugh tree, very well respected. When you're literally brought up around football, coaching, you know, I think you kind of learn a little bit some of the ins and outs that maybe some guys who aren't brought up around it don't fully understand. But yes, you need to be a smart coach. Yes, you need to understand X's and O's. You also got to understand how to lead a group of men. And it's probably one of the most important qualities in finding a head coach. And it's why certain guys just aren't cut out for the job. So when I see a guy like Shula who's been around it for his entire life, that's something where I go, okay, that's a little bit of a cherry on top. 39 years old, been coaching in college football and in the NFL since 2010. Here's where I thought this was kind of interesting. So he's a Miami guy, graduated from the U, but he was also an Indiana grad assistant from 2011 to 2013. So maybe how, depending on Chris Shula's answer, if he walks in there, who you're rooting for, Fernando Mendoza or the U, maybe that'll determine if he ends up getting the job. And obviously I'm joking when I say that, but, you know, again, I think it's kind of interesting to sit back there and look at when you're talking about Chris Shula. Let's go to the next name that the Raiders requested to interview, Rams pass game coordinator Nate Scheelhaase. Yes, it's pronounced Scheelhaase. I'm guessing it's a very German name. Played quarterback at college at Illinois. So this is somebody that I think when the Raiders are looking at certain names, I think that there are certain names where you go, that guy's interviewing for a head coaching job, right? Evero, head coaching job. Chris Shula, head coaching job. I really don't think that Nate Scheelhaase is interviewing for a head coaching job. Yes, it's what it's being labeled as, but the Raiders, they interviewed Davis Webb last week, the Broncos quarterback coach, pass game coordinator, young guy, 30 years old. I think that that was an offensive coordinator interview. And I'll say this, I think Nate Scheelhaase is also an offensive coordinator interview for the Raiders. He's been on the Rams staff the past 2 seasons. Here's one of the things that I really like, and I just discovered this morning, and again, I'm just like all y'all. I get news, I get information, I dive a little bit more, and I try to uncover certain things that I like. Worked underneath Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell was the head coach for Iowa State for many years, and he did a lot of great things building up that program. And, you know, if you're the Raiders, you're trying to look and you're trying to find people that have kind of been there and done that. What do I mean by that? Like, Iowa State was nothing in college football. Matt Campbell comes in, builds them up. They're in the top 25. They won a lot of important games. And now Campbell's with Penn State. I love the Matt Campbell hire, but one of the things that Matt Campbell did such a good job of was building a roster, building a team, building up coaches, and Campbell in college football in the NFL was very well respected, and Campbell got multiple head coaching jobs, interviews. Yes, he did not take them. He decided to stay in college, but working underneath somebody like that from 2018 to 2023 as a running back coach, run game coordinator, wide receiver coach, quarterback coach, and offensive coordinator, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to soak up a lot. You're going to be a sponge. And when I think about running back coach, run game coordinator, again, a little bit of a cherry on top because we need somebody that understands how to run the football with a 2 tight end set, with Ashton Genty, and that's something that, I'm going to be honest, I really liked in there from Nate Scheelhaase. Let's go to another candidate here. The Raiders requested to interview offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur. This is another name that I had in my top 10 Raiders head coach candidates video. Rams OC since 2023, so he's got some experience with Sean McVay. Also was the New York Jets offensive coordinator in 2021 and 2022. That was with Robert Saleh. That did not go well, but you know, again, like you sit back and you go, was that a Mike LaFleur issue or was that just simply a New York Jets issue? And I hate to say it, but I'm probably going to say it's more of a Jets issue. So when you have somebody from the Sean McVay tree and the Kyle Shanahan tree, that's going to be really important. 38 years old, been coaching since 2009, a lot of experience. Somewhere where, again, if you're the Raiders, what's hard about Mike LaFleur, giggity, is he doesn't call plays for the Rams. That's Sean McVay. So you're potentially looking at hiring an offensive coordinator that they don't call plays. I don't believe that LaFleur would leave that job to come to the Raiders to call plays. I'd be pretty shocked about it, but you could consider it an upgrade. I do think if LaFleur ends up coming in, he's going to be your head coach. So hear me out here, right? So if you're going to bring in a guy like Mike LaFleur, you got to probably make sure that either A, you're bringing in somebody like a Nate Scheelhaase to be able to help him out, or somebody that has head coaching experience. So the name I'm going to bring up real quick, Mike McDaniel. I think that this could be somebody sneaky where I think McDaniel, if he gets a job, it's going to be either a head coach or the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. Based on the way his offense runs, as much as I love Genty, I think Achin is a hell of a back. Jahmyr Gibbs, though, is you hit the upgrade button on Achin, and Mike McDaniel, I do think, would be able to do a lot of great things in Detroit. Here's what's cool, though. You could pair him, Mike LaFleur, with Mike McDaniel. They were on the same staff together from 2014 to 2020. That's the Browns, that's the Falcons, that's the 49ers. Interesting stuff. Now, you could make the argument, again, that Mike LaFleur was an upgrade, or is an upgrade, going from not calling plays to the Rams to calling plays with the Raiders. That you could make the argument. So if you were to hire a dude like Robert Saleh, maybe he decides to bring Mike LaFleur again with him, because when Saleh got the job at the Jets, he went out and he got Mike LaFleur to call plays for him. You know, you could say it failed once. I don't know if it makes sense to do it again. It's definitely a fair argument, but I do know the Raiders are interested in Robert Saleh, and the fact that there's a little bit of overlap there is something to consider. Let's go to the final name that the Raiders requested to interview yesterday. Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. He's been the DC since 2024, Boston College head coach from 2020 to 2023. Also, Niners and Browns with Shanahan, so he's got some overlap there. And then Niners and Browns with Mike McDaniel. So this is another person where you're sitting there going, I wonder if the Raiders go out and they hire a Jeff Hafley, could their plan be, well, let's try to bring in a Mike McDaniel to be the offensive coordinator of the Silver and Black. So overall, in total, as it stands right now, the Raiders have requested to interview 10 head coaches. I'll tell you who the other 5 are if you forget who they are. But between Evero, Shula, Scheelhaase, LaFleur, and Hafley, out of those 5 names, which one out of those names excites you the most? I'm going to hit you guys with a YouTube ad break. While that ad is playing, I want you to scroll on down, give me your answer. My answer is going to be coming up here in just a moment. I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to go, Chris Shula is the name that, again, like I know the Rams defense has struggled a little bit down the stretch, but they also don't spend a lot of money. I mean, it's one of the second cheapest, I believe it's the second cheapest defense in the NFL. And that's important to me because the Raiders have so many damn holes. We might have to go a little bit cheaper on the defensive side of the football this season. That way you're able to build up that offense around Mendoza, Genty, and Bowers, that offensive line where a lot of your money is going to end up being invested. So I look at what the Rams have done and I go, all right, maybe we can create that exact same thing here for the Silver and Black. But I do think that the Raiders are planning something. And, you know, I'm looking at all these interviews. I'm kind of going through and looking at all the head coach candidates. And I was like, all right, I know exactly what video I'm going to do this morning for Raider Nation. I'm going to tell you what I think the Raiders are doing. They're playing maybe a little chess, a little checkers. Where there's smoke, there's fire. You guys know all the sayings here. So the Silver and Black got 10 head coach candidates as it stands right now. The 5 names that I mentioned earlier on this video. Then you got former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, Seahawks offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak, Chiefs OC Matt Nagy, Broncos quarterback coach Davis Webb, and then Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. What's really interesting about those 10 names, none of those 10 names are Jesse Minter, Robert Saleh, or Brian Flores. And the reason why that I find that interesting is because the top 3 names that I have personally heard, Jesse Minter, Robert Saleh, Brian Flores. I would say if you look at the top odds out there, according to Vegas, Jesse Minter, Robert Saleh, Brian Flores. The reason why I find all this to be interesting is because I've been saying on this show for a long time, if you're the Raiders and you got certain guys that you're like, that's the guy that I want. That's the guy that I want. You can't afford to have another Ben Johnson situation. You can't have another situation where you have Mike Vrabel. The top 2 people Tom Brady wanted last year, Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson ended up obviously taking the Bears job. Tip my cap to Ben and the Bears. Hell of a football game the other day against Green Bay. But Ben Johnson ended up taking that Chicago job. They had a quarterback, and they just, I think, overall had a better fit. Then Mike Vrabel never really came in because as soon as the Patriots job opened up, Vrabel knew exactly where he was going to go. If you're Tom Brady, you're probably thinking to yourself, man, I didn't think one person would turn me down, let alone two people. It's probably a whole nother conversation I shouldn't even get into. But, Tom Brady is probably sitting there going, John Spytek's probably sitting there going, if there's a guy that we want, I want to be able to sell him the job. And if you're the Raiders and you want to be able to sell that guy the job, I think what's really important is maybe you understanding who you're thinking about as a defensive coordinator, who you're thinking about as an offensive coordinator. Maybe you're looking at a young guy like a Davis Webb, like a, Scheelhaase. Maybe a LaFleur comes on over. But if you have that person in mind, you've heard the outside media, the Raiders got this bad of a job. I think the Raiders' job is a lot better than what it gets credit for. Number 1 overall pick, 10 draft picks, over $100 million in salary cap. The Raiders are the only team with over top 3 money in salary cap the next 2 years. We're the only team. So, you got to be able to sell this Raiders job to your top candidates. And what I find interesting is the Raiders have not submitted a request for Chargers defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, or Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores. So I do really believe that the Raiders, what they have done in their first 10 candidates is they have gotten a bunch of different people. You got a former head coach in Kevin Stefanski. You got a lot of young, up-and-coming people on the offensive side, a lot of young and upcoming people on the defensive side. You're looking around at the AFC West rivals. You're sniffing around the Green Bay Packers, who we're going to talk about them here in a second because there's a lot of rumors that they could move on from their head coach. You got some other guys like Mike McDaniel. The coaching candidates that the Raiders have brought in, I think that there's always a reason behind it. Then you look at the first candidates they brought in. Davis Webb was the first one. I think that's somebody they're looking at as an OC. You bring in some other guys like Nagy, Stefanski, Vance Joseph, and then you bring in Klint Kubiak. To me, the Raiders, with Spytek, with Brady, they're always going to think about their plan. You have to, because your plan last season, it was thrown out the window because Pete Carroll didn't want to follow it. I really believe that the Raiders have a plan in place, and I think that their plan is getting everything prepared, getting everything ready, because when you interview Klint Kubiak, that was your most important interview last week. It was also the last one they did. Now you're looking at all these other interviews. I believe that the Raiders are stacking up certain interviews. That way they can put the best resume forward to a Jesse Minter, to a Robert Saleh, to a Brian Flores. Though I will admit, I haven't been hearing as much around Flores over the past week, maybe week and a half since that Pro Football Talk article ended up coming out. But none of those guys have interviews. I believe the Raiders are going to start submitting some of those interviews this week. Typically when you see it happen is Tuesday and Wednesday, January 13th and the 14th. But I would say in the next 72 hours, you're going to get some sort of news around the Raiders requesting to interview Minter, Saleh, Brian Flores. If they wait any longer, it's, I think, because they don't want to tip their hand. And maybe they don't want to tip their hand. Maybe they don't want other people to, know where they're going. But I think that this is what the Raiders' plan is. We will see. It's going to be interesting. It's why you should subscribe. Coming up next here on the show, we're going to get into the NFL news that you need to see this morning. Because, again, with this time of the year, there's so much information that comes out all the flipping time. And it's about just staying on top of it. It's about staying up to date. Because this is a really important time where dot some I's, cross some T's, staying in the know around the NFL. Because when you stay in the know around the NFL, when you're the Raiders and you're looking for a head coach, it is very important. NFL news does impact the Raiders every single time that it comes out, especially around head coaches. I will get into that here in just a moment. Before I do, today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life and on Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night, the action never stops, and Prize Picks lets you take control. On Prize Picks, how you play, it's up to you. And if you want flexibility, you can choose a flex play. If you want to go with a little bit more money, you can go power play, which is what I'm going to be doing tonight in the Steelers and Texans game. So if you want to know what I got, I already took advantage of the Caleb Williams deal. It's been in all of my lineups this week. This is a 4-pick power play, $5 to pay $32.50. What I decided to do was, again, Caleb Williams, they gave you 0.5 passing yards. Obviously, I'm going to take that. Aaron Rodgers, I took the more on a passing touchdown. I need 1 passing touchdown from Aaron Rodgers. Ka'imi Fairbairn, he has had 4 straight games over 9 fantasy points. So I took the more on the fantasy score in Houston. It's going to be cold. I think the weather's going to be weapon. I could see a few field goals banging through for Houston. And then Will Anderson, 0.25 sacks. He needs half a sack. I took the more there. I think Houston's defense is going to be flying all around. I know Rodgers doesn't typically get hit all that much, but at the same time, older quarterback, hasn't dealt with pressure very well. Houston's got the best defensive line. They're going to be bringing the heat up against Rodgers. He's obviously going to try to get the ball out quickly, but Will Anderson, half a sack, I'll take the more on it. I'm going to be rooting for the Houston Texans. And if you guys are going to be rooting with the Texans with me tonight, reminder, I will be live 30 minutes before kickoff tonight. So Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app out there. It's also available now in all 50 states, which I think is pretty damn cool. Download the Prize Picks app today. This link is going to be available to y'all down in the comments, down in the description of the show. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, let's keep it moving here with some of the NFL news that you need to know. Browns and the Ravens have requested to interview Jesse Minter. The fact that the Chargers lost last night, thank the Lord, FLAC, I do believe that the Raiders, I think it's going to start picking up here a little bit for the head coaching search because Minter's available now. And if Minter wants to go take a job, he can go take the job. And I would say the top 2 teams for Minter, number 1, hate to admit it, I think it's the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens have been sniffing around. I think they saw the whole Harbaugh situation, John, as being like, all right, we're going to move on from him. Maybe they feel like they should have hired Mike McDonald, who's doing a hell of a job right now in Seattle. He was working underneath Harbaugh in Baltimore. The guy that was before McDonald, Jesse Minter. So I do wonder if that's where this team could potentially look at going. They typically like to go with more defensive-minded guys anyway. And I would say that it's between the Ravens and the Raiders for Jesse Minter. But the fact that also the Browns, an AFC North team, is going to be interviewing him. Minter's going to be a hot name. And it was reported, I think, last week by Jordan Schultz. Minter's the really, really hot name going around. Minter's been the #1 name that I've heard for months around the Raiders. So I do think that this search is going to pick up here a little bit. More news coming in from Schefter. The Packers are now expected to try to work out a deal in the coming days to keep head coach Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. LaFleur currently has 1 year remaining on his contract. Both sides want clarity moving forward. So the Packers want clarity. Also, LaFleur wants clarity. I think that's interesting because, again, Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator in Green Bay, there was some speculation if he could potentially, take over for LaFleur. But if they get that brand new contract, that could be somebody that I do think right now, he was in my top 10 candidates video. I'm not saying that that's the name they're going to go with, but if you were to tell me, Mitch, who's the outside of the box name that you believe the Silver and Black could end up hiring, I think Hafley is a very intriguing name there, Packers defensive coordinator, because I do think the Raiders' plan in their mind is let's get a defensive-minded head coach, let's get an offensive coordinator that can call plays, can be the head coach on offense, and that's just kind of how I think the pairing is going to go. I think they tried to do it last year with Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. Then also, Browns, they're interviewing Mike McDaniel today for their head coach opening. So that's a lot of names that could impact the Raiders. A lot of people that I think personally, once certain dominoes start falling, it happens really, really quickly in the NFL. And the fact that Minter is now available, I believe certain dominoes are going to start falling in the NFL. Harbaugh, that's going to be a domino. Minter's going to be a domino. And once those happen, you're going to start seeing a lot more coaches get jobs, and the Raiders got to make sure that they're ready to go. And that's why the coaching candidates that they have already scheduled to interview is so damn important. Satisfy the Rooney Rule, interview good coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinator potentials, head coach candidates. You put it all into the mix, because when the dominoes start to fall, you got to be ready. And if you're not ready, you're going to swing and miss again. Can't afford to swing and miss again this offseason, Tom. Let's talk about the NFL divisional round. A lot of good games. Just so all of y'all know, I will be live next Saturday for the 49ers and Seahawks game, and I will also be live next Saturday for the Bills and Broncos game. The times are still TBD on both of those, but to me, I typically don't work on Saturdays. I will be working this Saturday, essentially just like what I did yesterday covering those two playoff games. I'm going to be rooting for Seattle to beat San Francisco, and you already know we're going to be rooting for Buffalo to take care of business against the Broncos. The Sunday divisional games, it really comes down to this Texans game tonight. If the Texans win, they will play the New England Patriots. I will be live for that Sunday game if it is Texans and Patriots. Sorry, New England, we rooted for you yesterday. Sorry, Tom Brady, I'm rooting for Houston to take care of business against New England if need be. The only game that I know I will not be live for, Rams and Bears. But that's going to be a hell of a football game. Now, I'm a man that always likes a good deal. If the Houston and New England game is the earlier game, which I would imagine the earlier game on that Sunday is going to be that Patriots game, simply because Patriots-Houston is more East Coast. Patriots-Steelers is obviously East Coast, where the Rams are that West Coast team. So I would imagine that Rams and Bears is the later game. If we hit our goal on the Texans and Patriots game, I can be convinced to stay live a little bit later on that Sunday for Rams and Bears. Just letting you know, I can be convinced. But at this moment, I do not plan on being live for that game. The only games I plan on definitely being live for, Bills, Broncos, 49ers, Seahawks. If the Texans win tonight, I will be live for Texans up against the Patriots. So before I hop on out of here again, appreciate everyone for always tuning in. Appreciate everyone for always pulling up. I saw one of my commenters the other day. They asked me, Mitch, could you grade all of the Raiders head coach candidates so far? I believe it's going to be the video that I get out a little bit later on today. Obviously, if more news ends up happening around the silver and black or around the NFL, that'll probably be the video that I get you. But you will get another video from me later on today before I go live for the Texans and Steelers game. And you already know I'm going to be cooking up another one for you bright and early tomorrow. I will be live tomorrow, same time like I always do on the Raiders Report on Tuesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific. Very, very important. If you're not already, make sure you click that subscribe button. We're going to be watching a lot of games for the NFL playoffs. Can't wait to go live for the Fernando Mendoza, Indiana game. A lot of head coaching stuff going down. This is the most important time of the offseason for Raider fans to hit that sub button. If you want content from the silver and black, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be your number one guy. I'm not the smartest. I'm not an insider. But at the end of the day, I'm a Raiders fan that's got a commitment to excellence to making sure the nation always stays up to date. If you vibe with that, hit that subscribe button. If you want more videos, you want more content here from the Raiders Report, we're a 100% free YouTube channel. Watch the show for a week. If you learned something, stick around. If you feel like you don't learn anything after the week, cool part is you can always unsubscribe.